Thank you for tuning in to Roach Radio. I'm your host, Roach, and welcome to Roach's debut audio experience. I was hoping it would be an album by now, but I guess this will have to do. Now, I can't thank you enough for tuning in, and I can't wait to see where this channel takes me and you on our musical journey. Today's topic is genre. Now, I'm sure I don't need to explain this, but just to get all my ducks in a row, genre is the classification of media by its typical characteristics. For example, thrash metal is fast, doom metal is slow. That's a very basic distinction, but you get the idea. Now, genre typically takes influence from genres that came before it. For example, the blues were doing all fine, well and good with their sad words put to fast-paced music, and usually played with guitars or a small quartet like Leadbelly or Mamie Smith. But then people like Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington shifted the focus away from the lyrical composition and shifted it more towards the instrumentals aspect. And instead of having just a quartet, they had a bunch of other instruments and gave all of those instruments solos throughout the song and thus created jazz. And jazz pioneers like Muddy Waters or B.B. King took the best of both worlds and made rhythm and blues. And the list goes on and on and on and on. So we better get started. First up, we have rock and roll. Now, this genre was spearheaded by two very different kinds of fellas, but it mainly consisted of the 4 to 5 piece band. It had a lead guitarist, a bassist, a drummer, a vocalist, and then a rhythm guitarist. And usually the vocalist took up one of the other roles aside from just being a vocalist. Now, the music that typically came from Bill Haley and Chuck Berry consisted of the 4 to 5 piece band like I mentioned, but there also tended to be another instrument like a keyboard or a saxophone to kind of spice things up. But this essentially marked the transition from adding distortion to your guitars. And what that means is pretty much a clean guitar sounds like this. And a distortion guitar sounds like this. Now, the distortion that you just heard was not what the distortion sounded like back then. The sound was so primitive that even my amp head that is made to imitate other amps can't make that sound. Next up, we have folk rock. So the main difference between folk and folk rock is the difference between Bob Dylan and Led Zeppelin, pretty much. Led Zeppelin's a lot louder, Bob Dylan's a little more quieter. Now, folk takes on a more unplugged feel, and they only try to feature as many instruments as it takes to properly convey the tone of the song. But folk rock typically has distortion, a way louder presence, and just a more... The lyrical composition is still kind of reminiscent of blues. It's pretty sad, very thought-provoking kind of music, but mainly sad. British beat. Now, across the pond over in the UK, rock and roll was being created in its own sort of fashion. It was very different from American rock. And if you ask me, I think British rock had a much bigger impact on American rock than American rock at the time. But that's just an assumption I made because, frankly, I hear a lot more of this in today's rock.
Tell you something, I think you'll understand.
Than I hear this.
My baby beside me at the wheel.
That's just a me thing. I barely ever hear anything reminiscent of the second example. And next up, we have psychedelic rock. Yes, it was mainly about drugs. A lot of the bands used hallucinogenic drugs to use them as a lyrical basis, use it as a musical basis, or just to relate to their demographic of listeners. Now, a quick tangent. Yes, Pink Floyd is classified as psychedelic rock, but to me, it's a very different type of sound from typical psychedelic rock. I would not lump, let's say, Jefferson Airplane with Pink Floyd because they have a very different sound. Because Pink Floyd popularized rock operas and concept albums. They weren't the first, but they popularized them. I don't know, Pink Floyd has a really big place in my heart. I should not have done that. I should not have done that. And now on to surf rock, one of the wettest and wildest genres of its time in the 50s and 60s. Surf rock is characterized by its general instrumentation that's kind of reminiscent of jazz, but they threw in a lot of tremolo sound effects onto the amps to make it sound wavy, if you know what I mean. And they also threw in so much reverb that the guitars literally sounded wet. Thus came surf rock. I don't know if those terms are why they call it surf rock. It could also be because a lot of the songs and the band names feature the word surf or beach or something coastal related. Now there are two distinctions of surf rock. There's the Beach Boys, where it's kind of like the barbershop quartet-esque type of music, but still associating with the motif of surfing and beach culture, I guess. And then there's Dick Dale, where they have the instrumentation with the wet reverb and the wavy tremolo. Real quick, I want to promote a band that I like. It's called Man or Astro Man. They're a fun, modern surf rock band. On their album, I think it's called Kill All Astro Man, track 11, Landlocked. It's really good. Next up, we got Southern Rock. Yeehaw. I gotta get my hat. Southern rock essentially takes the root of blues, the twang of country, and turns the volume way, way up. Some of their lyric composition tends to steal from their predecessor, folk, and they tend to tell ballady types of stories. Next up, we got punk. I'm gonna take my hat off because this is not punk. I don't make up the rules. Now, where the 60s make love, not war movement was about not conforming to the man, punk was about killing the man. Punk woke up and chose violence. They have fast tempos, power chord riffs, fairly simple melodies, and lyrics that are more often than not very political based. Now, this genre is still alive and well. I personally am not a big punk fan, but I can honestly say that there's still a lot of good punk out there, just gotta find it. But more importantly, music as a whole was very much impacted by punk. It was a revolutionary time. And now we're on to grunge. Pearl Jam's up there. I don't like them very much, but they're up there. Oh, I'm still alive. Yeah. I can't stand Pearl Jam. Now, I should have explained this before I explained punk, but hi-fi is when the sound that is being played is extremely close to the sound that you are hearing when you play back the audio. It's really good sound. On the opposite end of that spectrum is lo-fi. I know you're probably thinking of like the lo-fi beats to study to, but lo-fi means low fidelity, meaning it's the opposite of high fidelity, meaning it sounds like shit. Now, it's not to say that like high fidelity songs sound good and low fidelity sounds bad. That's not what I'm saying. I like low fidelity songs. I think it makes the sound a little more interesting, but there's a point where it just gets a little too low. Grunge essentially slowed down the tempo of punk, but kept the low fidelity. Whereas punk sounded like this, grunge sounded like this. The most effective way to describe grunge is grungy. And I think it's hilarious that even like grunge bands do not like that the term grunge is now a genre name. They hate it. But I think a lot of modern musicians want to be claimed to be grunge because it was so acclaimed back then. Because grunge has one of the richest histories in rock because it was just such a crazy time. It was when music was starting to be able to be made at your own home. It was starting to get a lot easier, and so everyone was making it, and a lot of things were coming out, and it was pretty interesting if you ask me. Okay, so before we continue into the heavier genres, I wanted to clarify two terms: alt and pop. Pop is not short for popular. It's short for pop culture, which is short for popular culture. But that doesn't mean that if something is popular, that means it's popular culture. It does not mean that. For example, Big Chungus was... For example, Big Chungus was a meme circa 2017, late 2017. Was it popular? AKA known by the general population? No, because it was typically only associated with the generation that it's circulated through by social media, like Instagram and iFunny and that kind of thing. Was it pop culture? Yes, because it was generally and popularly associated with a certain generation, a certain influential generation. It was so ingrained into pop culture that it can be referenced and remembered 4 years after it's lost its humor. And in fact, it even had a bit of a relapse where it got ironically funny, which is just a whole memetics thing that I don't want to go over, but that's a thing. Memetics, look it up. There it is, right there, it's a real word. Now I recommend this video if you want to go into more detail about what the differences between alts and the pop and whatnot. But to give a quick example of it would be Tame Impala's The Less I Know The Better. That's pop, because you knew that riff. You knew what it was, you were, there it is, you know. But the rest of Tame Impala's discography, that's alt, because it's not in the pop culture. Can you name 2 other Tame Impala songs? I can't. I love The Less I Know The Better, but I don't give a shit about the rest of his music. It's not my thing. Sorry. Hard rock. Almost one of my least favorite bands. Can you guess which one I don't like? Post in the comments. Which one you think I don't like? So I skipped over rock because the term rock is really just an umbrella term for everything. Grunge, that's rock. Some would say it's metal, but it's not. I also skipped over soft rock because it's kind of in the general jargon of rock, like Billy Joel. Some would say he's folk. I say he's soft. That's what I don't like about genre. It's very vague, and anyone can have an opinion about it, and everyone will get on to you if you misgenre their music, and it's just a whole thing. Ugh. I'm probably gonna get canceled for this video. But the main distinction of hard rock is that it's getting more aggressive, the distortion's getting stronger, and it's not quite metal, but it's really close. It's getting there. Heavy metal. This is where my expertise kind of lies here. So now the singers are screaming, being very aggressive about their vocals. The distortion on the guitar is paramount. The bass is gone. It's a relic of the past. Don't look that up. I'm telling you the truth. And the lyric composition is being associated with Satan, sometimes for good reason. Fun fact: this guy actually invented this. Sort of. He kind of invented it. He popularized it. It's called throwing horns. Thrash metal. This was my first genre I was ever exposed to. That band there. I love Metallica. That's my. Oof, I should not have done that. It's classified by fast tempos, tremolo picking, and alcoholism. Fun times, and a lot of feuds too. A lot of angry people in thrash metal. There's a lot of anger there. Power metal. Power metal is like thrash metal, but if they started playing D&D. I can get down with some power metal because like they often feature symphonic elements, some beautiful top-notch singing, and lyrics about like quests and dragons and alcoholism. Folk metal. These guys are fun. Folk metal is a lot of fun. So folk metal is pretty much like if power metal stopped being thrash metal. Sometimes they can be thrash, but they're usually not. A lot of musical elitists will say that genre cannot be determined by lyrical content. But I think they're wrong, because I think lyrics have a big part in saying about what the song's about, which leads to what the band's about, which leads to what genre it's in. It just makes more sense to me. I'm not saying it's the biggest thing to consider, I just think it's like a tipping point deciding factor, you know? A lot of folk metal sounds different from band to band, but the general theme throughout them all is their lyrical content. It's about lore, it's about mythology. It could be literally be about Lord of the Rings or God, like the Christian God, or it could be about Odin. It's usually about Odin and Thor. It's a lot of Norse things going on. Nu metal. if this is your favorite genre, you probably don't shut up about it. I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I don't know how to classify these ones, because like System of a Down sounds completely different from Slipknot, but they're both considered nu metal. Yeah, here's some examples. Look up a playlist, take it as you go, you know? I don't know what to do. There they are. Have fun with it. Death metal. I'm not gonna lie. This shit nasty. I'm not a fan of death metal, so I can't say much about it other than the fact that I know that it's fast, it's tuned really low, it's heavy as hell, and they sing about death and murder and eating and it's not lighthearted entertainment for the whole family. I mean, just look at these names. Beethoven would not have seen this coming. If you want a real desensitized version of what death metal is because you don't want to listen to it, I don't want to listen to it either, check out this video. He takes away all the instrumentals of death metal and makes it an acoustic cover, but he maintains all of the lyrics, and they're all disgusting. Another quick tangent I want to go on. It amazes me, it baffles me that people want to cancel Billie Eilish because of the song I Wish You Were Gay. Because like they think it's queer appropriation or queer baiting, when the song is literally about, like her words, it's about wishing someone that she was interested in was gay so that when that person rejected her, it didn't hurt as bad. The lyrics, "Sometimes I wish you were gay," according to some, make this LGBTQ plus ally an appropriator. But a band called Cannibal Corpse can put out these lyrics and nobody gives a shit. The lead guitarist was found with over 80 guns and 3 skulls in his house, and he sings about murder and death and necrophilia and nasty stuff I just don't want to keep talking about. Can we please change the genre? Black metal. I really want to put like black metal paint on because I feel like that'd be funny for the bit, but I just do not like the idea of having that makeup just caked on my face. It doesn't sound like a good time. Remember when I mentioned low fidelity earlier and how grunge was low fidelity? Black metal is like way down here. A good example of this would be when Berzoom used the microphone on a headset to record their demo, and this is what it sounded like. The history for the genre is so interesting to me that I'm gonna save it for a different video. But in general terms, black metal sounds like this. I'm gonna steal a joke from Anthony Fantano, but a dude on this album killed a dude on this album. Doom metal. It's not as heavy as you think, I promise. So doom metal starts to... Cool car, man, cool car. Doom metal starts to slow things down and make things a little sad. Now I can't say for sure what doom metal exactly is influenced by, but it's metal that has been slowed down and is pretty sad. It's known for its low tones, slow progressions, and its sad lyrics. There's literally a subgenre of doom metal called funeral doom. I don't know, man. I haven't checked it out, but it sounds kind of sick. The fun part about doom is that it was popularized by stoners and would later go on to influence the creation of stoner doom. And yes, they are extremely different. Stoner rock. It's a fun genre. Stoner rock is sort of an offshoot of grunge. It maintains that low fidelity, and it kind of shifts the focus away from the lyrics and more towards the instrumentation. They do a lot of improvised jamming, and they experiment a lot with the sound that their guitars make. It's a fun genre, if I'm being quite honest. They also sing about drugs sometimes, you know. Sometimes the songs are conceptualized because of drugs. kind of to be expected at this point. From here, things get really hairy in terms of genre placement. So much so that you kind of have to do your own determination for it. Bands can call themselves whatever genre they want to some extent at the end of the day, but it's really up to the listener to try and define what genre they want to listen to, or what genre that their favorite band is, and thus move on from there and find new bands. And it takes time to learn how to judge a band's band title, the album covers, album titles, the song titles, and then just the plain music to try and decipher what genre it is. This meme I found on TikTok is perfect.
I don't even know what that means.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, it's not. It
Gets the people going.
Western space grunge. From this title, I can deduce that the Western aspect is probably influenced by Southern rock or maybe reminiscent of country music. The space makes me think that there is possibly a synth wave in there, and the grunge in modern terms most likely means that it's just low fidelity. Let's see if I was right. So I was kind of right. The vocalization is very grunge influenced, but it has that slight twang to it. It's barely there, you gotta listen to it though. And the music is, I'd say, more on the grunge side. I'm not sure where the space comes from, but the drummer was right. Adding space in there kind of like attunes to their name. It was very provocative. It definitely got me to listen to it. So I know I missed a few, but maybe I'll pick up my slack in a part 2 of this video, who knows. All I can say is that the genres that I listed off today are very building block based in terms of the music that we'll be discussing throughout the rest of this channel. Be sure to like this video if you feel you've learned something. Be sure to subscribe if you want to keep learning things, and drop a comment. Maybe you can teach me something. But until then, I'm your host, Roach, signing off.